Guys, Mr. Tobitt here for you. We're going to be going through our topic 3.4 notes, kind of looking at how the Enlightenment that is going to inspire a bunch of social change. So it's kind of one of those, once you think about, we go from, the Enlightenment being a Western European-based thing that's going to have, people that look like this image here, look like myself making decisions in a room. And we're going to see it's going to go on to inspire groups of people that look very, very differently during its own time and then even up to the present day. So kind of some things I want you to take in notes on today is, looking at, what are some different social movements that have been inspired by the Enlightenment? How do those ideas that we see kind of up in the top right here, how do those ideas go on to influence the movement to abolish slavery? And how does it influence our first wave of feminism? So before we begin, kind of a good time to kind of think about what are some of those Enlightenment ideas we learned about in some earlier topics. Things like having natural rights or inalienable rights. Locke identifies life, liberty, and property among those. Wollstonecraft's going to be probably some of our first female Enlightenment thinker, kind of pushing for women's equality, particularly in the areas of education. But we've also, one we didn't hit on, is this idea of, getting rid of torture. And we see that show up in our Bill of Rights where we can't have cruel or unusual punishment. We're going to see some of those ideas applied to slavery as well. So some key vocabulary that's going to help kind of us understand our information here. One of those is emancipation. So when we hear the term emancipation as Americans, we often think of the Emancipation Proclamation that's going to end slavery in the Confederate States of America. It kind of changes the meaning of what the Civil War is being fought for. So we always kind of apply it with slavery, which is good. But emancipation itself actually means what we see in our definition here. So it's being set free in several areas, whether that's legal, so, the actual law, your rights to be involved in making the law or political system, and then also the social structures that we're going to see in place, being free from those restrictions. Abolition, we'll think about the abolition of slavery, so that's just the ending or the outlawing of it. One we're definitely going to hit on is going to be patriarchy, and so this is where a society is set up where men hold the power over female citizens, and where power is excluded and women are allowed to kind of be involved in the process of being, in the process of making those political decisions. Feminism is going to be kind of the push to limit or eventually get rid of patriarchy so that you end up with an equality of the sexes. And I do want to remind you, if I'm ever going too fast, guys, always remember you can pause, take notes, rewatch individual sections. So the abolitionist movement, we're going to get into kind of the causes of it here in a moment, but want to kind of talk about first off the overall big goal of if you're an abolitionist during the 1800s and for some pioneers in the late 1700s, your goal was to end slavery. Kind of all abolitionists agreed upon that. And they, throughout the 18th century, we're going to see success on that front. The first front comes just through pure violence. That's going to be in the Haitian Revolution. So Haiti is, where if we remember to our Atlantic revolutions, a bunch of slaves rose up against the French rulers, became independent, and of course, as former slaves, rapidly go ahead and abolish slavery. The US and the British are going to agree to stop the slave trade. That does not mean stop slavery, but it means they're going to be stopping the Middle Passage. And it's actually part of the US Constitution that in 1808 Americans would stop importing slaves. The idea then was that that would lead to a natural end of slavery. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way, which you'll learn more about in your US history class. But the British making this decision to end the slave trade was really important because if you think about your middle school history, you probably learned Britain had a really powerful navy. So the most powerful navy in the world decides that they're going to be against the slave trade. That's a really big deal. And we're going to see, it takes a while, and all these are struggles. But between the 1830s and 1880s, we're going to see legal slavery is pretty much ended across the world. Now, there's still forms of coercive labor that are going to take place, like debt bondage, convict leasing we're going to see in the United States after the Civil War, and then, of course, trafficking today. So there's still forms of the actual legal system of slavery is going to be abolished. One thing I wanted to mention, though, we talked about all abolitionists are opposed to slavery and want to end the slave trade. It's the goal for some abolitionists, particularly for Black abolitionists, people like Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, was not only should slavery be ended, but we also need to be having equality of the races and justice between the races. That's not a goal shared by many of the white abolitionists. So what kind of leads to this abolitionist movement? Well, hopefully as you're kind of following along with this unit, you're thinking some of these ideas of the Enlightenment. A lot of the American founding fathers would go so far as to say that the King of England had put Americans into slavery with his different system. Now, that's ridiculous to say, but that was the argument they were making. And so this idea, we see Thomas Jefferson, a slave owner, writing that, these truths are self-evident, that everyone's equal, that everyone should have liberty. And that's put into the Declaration of Independence, and that's going to go on to inspire a lot of abolitionists, particularly a lot of the white abolitionists. A lot of your black abolitionists are saying, slavery is just wrong, would say, hey, it's self-evident it's wrong, and we just shouldn't have it. We don't need enlightenment to tell us that. But they're going to use those Enlightenment ideas to kind of push that message. Something else that is going to occur during this is the media is going to be changing. So we're going to be getting, for the first time, photographs, which are going to be able to show people what slavery is like. We're going to be hearing from former slaves themselves. We're going to have some best-selling books that are going to kind of show what slavery was really like. Prior to this, all everyone was really hearing about slavery was coming from the slave owner's perspective, and they were saying, no, no, slavery's fine, it's good for the slaves, all that. That's going to change when people can literally see with their own eyes what it's really like, the harshness of it, the brutality of it. So that's going to do it. A lot of Black Americans in particular are going to be inspired by the Haitian Revolution. They're going to say, hey, they got rid of slavery in the early 1800s. Why do we still have it? So that's going to be a big spark for that. And the Haitian Revolution is also going to inspire a quicker ending of slavery among a lot of the newly independent Latin American countries. Mexico is going to abolish slavery well before the United States, as we're also going to see across a lot of the Caribbean and Central American stuff. The final big influence that you'll learn more in U.S. history, America, as well as England, especially America, becomes super duper religious during this time. It's called the Second Great Awakening, particularly becoming more Christian. And with that, everyone's equal in God's eyes. Slavery is really bad. Looking at the book of Exodus. So those are going to be some things that are going to be pushing this abolition of slavery in addition to the Enlightenment. Going forward, we're going to see, patriarchy is going to stick around longer than slavery. And this is Nelson Mandela, who was a guy he knows a lot about oppression. He was thrown in prison for 40 years for saying that Black South Africans should be treated equally as white South Africans. But he's going to go on as president and say, freedom can't be achieved unless women are emancipated from their forms of oppression. Remember, emancipation not just being political freedom, but also social freedom. So some things we want to hit on here, kind of the context, and you don't need to take a note on this part, just kind of recognizing the way things were in the world. Most of the world has had a form of patriarchy in one form or another. At this time, we're going to focus on Western Europe because Western Europe, because of colonialism, is going to be spreading a lot of these ideas around the world. Remember, patriarchy is this idea of a male-dominated society where women are excluded from political power. So how does Western Europe become such a patriarchy? First, you've got the Catholic Church. Is very much a patriarchy. Women can't be leaders in the Catholic Church. So women can't be priests, women can't be the Pope, they can't be bishops. So the Catholic Church is very much patriarchy, and that's going to filter into things the Catholic Church influences. And there, remember, if we go back to the Middle Ages from the previous units, they're the unifying force of Europe after the Roman Empire falls. The Roman Empire was a patriarchy too, but had a little more rights for women than we'll see here. Feudalism is also a patriarchy. Princes were more important than princesses. Men inherited property, not women. So those two big power structures make Western Europe a patriarchy. Now, we both know, though, that the patriarchy of feudalism decreases as well as the Catholic Church's power. So we're seeing as those things diminish in power, women are actually becoming more involved politically, more involved in society in general. So we're seeing progress on that front, and then Napoleon happens, and when Napoleon kind of conquers most of Western Europe, he's going to kind of set things backwards on the gender equality spectrum. Divorce becomes pretty much impossible under Napoleon's laws, especially if a woman wanted it. And so we see a lot of those elements come back. Again, that kind of gets spread and codified into a lot of European systems. Now, Napoleon doesn't conquer all of Europe, though, and he certainly doesn't conquer the United States. which is why the United States and England is going to be kind of where the first wave of feminism is going to kick off. So would want you to take some notes here, particularly looking at the goals of first wave feminism. Feminists get involved in a lot of social movements at this time. They're very involved in the abolitionist movement, and as they're pushing for abolition, they're saying, well, why are we just trying to get rid of slavery? We also need to make this other positive social change, which is women having more equality. Particularly with a lot of these leaders, this is white feminists, so white women, and they're going to be pushing for the equality of them. They're not so much pushing for racial equality, which leads to a lot of tension between white feminists and black feminists during this time. Um, we're also going to see women in some of those other big ones, but definitely wanted to hit on, that anti-slavery movement as well as kind of a lot of the religious increasing involvement there. Women were kind of viewed as kind of the glue of society in the Western world at this time. And so because of that, they're kind of put on almost a pedestal of, importance. People are going to start listening to them a little bit more. Well, one of the big things, of course, they want is to be involved in the political system. That involves being equal in the eyes of the law. So the ability to own property, the ability to divorce their husbands, the ability to have equality in marriage. So if, in a marriage we collectively gain things, well, it shouldn't just be my husband that gets to make all the choices. And if I want a divorce, I should be able to get a divorce. Those kind of things. Of course, women also want the right to vote, but they also wanted all of these other things too. And finally, employment and education opportunities. A lot of these things women are going to get. Unfortunately, not all of them, and that's why we're going to need more than just the first wave of feminism. We can see in the top right here, talking about the natural, inalienable, and sacred rights of women. Again, showing you that the ideas of the Enlightenment were certainly inspiring this wave of feminism. So kind of wrapping up here, Enlightenment's going to inspire the social movements of abolition and women's rights. And then it's going to inspire future ones as well. Now, the women's rights movement kind of gets set back by the world wars because women kind of recognize that society does not want to see a big focus on changing the domestic system right now. We're in the middle of these world wars. So women are going to get very involved in the war effort as, soldiers and nurses and factories and stuff. So they become part of that economy. And that's going to lead to kind of the second wave of feminism where we're pushing for more and more equality, less and less harassment, those kind of things we'll see later on in the term. The Enlightenment is going to continue to inspire change. I'm up to the present day, so we're going to see Martin Luther King in his I Have a Dream speech talk about truths of self-evident and that all men are created equal. We see in the modern day Malala is talking about, women should have the right to education, very much so in lines with Mary Wollstonecraft. Cesar Chavez is going to talk about, the God-given rights of particularly Latino farm workers to kind of have the rights to shelter and a decent wage and things. And then even we see with the push for gay rights, we're going to see in the Supreme Court decision talking about equality in the eyes of the law. So all of these are Enlightenment ideas that stay with us today to keep pushing our society in a progressive manner towards progress, towards improvement. And those are very much in line with the Enlightenment.